In the headlines, President Park Geun-hye speaking at the APEC Summit in Beijing endorses a China-backed trade deal, promising South Korea's active participation in joint efforts to realize the trade pact. And staying in Beijing, President Park Geun-hye holds summit talks with U.S. President Barack Obama on the sidelines. The two leaders vow joint efforts to denuclearize North Korea. And the captain of the ferry that sank back in April gets 36 years in jail, found guilty of breaking seaman's law and abandoning the ship, causing more deaths and injuries. Hello and welcome to Arirang News, coming to you live from Seoul. I am Kang Chery. We begin in Beijing, where President Park Geun-hye and U.S. President Barack Obama held summit talks on the sidelines of the APEC Summit on this Tuesday. Korea's presidential office says the two leaders agreed that the international community's concerted position is very important in addressing the North Korean nuclear issue. Presidents Park and Obama then agreed to continue their joint efforts to denuclearize North Korea. They also talked about the need to cooperate with Japan on this matter. Seoul's peace and unification initiatives were also discussed in the meeting. On the Ebola outbreak, President Park spoke highly of her American counterpart's leadership in combating the disease, to which President Obama thanked Seoul for its support behind the international campaign to contain the virus. One of the main points of conversation at this year's APEC Summit has been China's vision for a regional trade bloc called the Free Trade Area of the Asia-Pacific. And this Tuesday, President Park Geun-hye pledged Korea's full backing, saying speeding up the liberalization of trade and investment in the Asia-Pacific region would be the most effective way to secure new momentum for regional growth. At a press briefing following the end of the summit, Chinese President Xi Jinping announced ministers of the 21 APEC member countries agreed to support the Free Trade Pact, calling it a new historic step. With the gate to the world's largest consumer market, which is China, set to be opened, Korea's service industries are gearing up to seize the moment. Following the announcement of the South Korea-China Free Trade Agreement on Monday, local banks are also getting ready for more UN-based transactions. Our Song Ji-sun has this report.
Korea's service industries that will gain access to China's 1.4 billion consumers range from travel and leisure to finance and distribution sectors. The free trade deal also allows Korean law firms to set up joint ventures with their Chinese counterparts in Shanghai's free trade zone, while Korean entertainment companies can hold stakes of up to 49% of Chinese entities. Beijing, which has pledged to ease regulations to allow Korean participation in building up China's public telecommunications networks, will explore ways to expand service sector cooperation between the two nations.
We will have more opportunities to gain greater access to the service sector, as follow-up negotiations will take place over the next 2 years, after the free trade deal takes effect.
Korean banks are also preparing for the increased need to settle bilateral trade in their own currencies. Seoul and Beijing have earlier agreed to open a direct yuan trading market in the Korean capital next month. The Chinese currency now accounts for a mere 1.2% of payments made to settle two-way trade that totaled $228 billion last year. The Korean government's goal is to raise that portion of yuan-based settlement to 20% next year. In the coming month, local banks will also launch savings plans in the Chinese yuan with an annual interest rate of 3%, nearly double the interest paid for local currency-based savings accounts. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Korea's reliance on China, though, for growth is only expected to grow with it, with their recently agreed upon a bilateral free trade agreement. This is especially true for the country's top 200 companies that are already very much active in China. Between 2011 and 2013, their combined sales there jumped 35% to more than $133 billion US. Samsung Electronics seems to have benefited the most from Korea's blossoming trade relationship with China. The firm's sales spiked to $36.6 billion in 2013, up 74% from 2011. Experts say Korean exporters need to focus more on premium, high-tech products and consumer goods to better tap into China's domestic market rather than depending too much on intermediate goods. The foreign fan base for Korean products continues to grow. It first started with clothes, then shifted to cosmetics, and now it's spreading to food products. Our seaman reports on why more and more consumers overseas are clicking the mouse to buy Korean goods online.
November 11th is celebrated as Pepero Day in Korea, as the Pepero snack resembles the ones in the date. Used as a marketing tool by the manufacturer Lotte Confectionery, the sales of the Pepero sticks fly off the shelves once early November rolls around each year, and the popularity has expanded to other countries. According to online retail shopping mall G-Market, sales of Pepero have topped the list of processed food products over the past month in its global shop.
But the growth expands far beyond Pepero. Last month, the total sales of Korean processed food surged over 160% on month.
The G-Market Global Shop, which reported a 57% sales jump in the first 10 months of this year, offers food items ranging from chocolate and instant noodles to seasoned liver, red chili paste, and even fermented seafood.
I regularly purchase salt fermented seafood online. It was a little difficult to get my hands on it, but now it only takes 3 to 5 days to get when I buy it online.
Online retail shopping malls are boosting services to accelerate the market. Malltail, a direct purchasing website, recently partnered up with the Korea Postal Service, making shipping easier for a number of products, even fresh produce.
Considering that the majority of the shopping exports are being made to China and the level of their spending on Korean products, whether it be cosmetics or Pepero, the sales will most likely surge. If their interest in Korean food products continues, it will definitely influence Korea's food industry.
And since Korea and China have concluded FTA negotiations on a deal that will remove tariffs on most products, more Chinese customers are expected to log into Korean online retailers to fill up their shopping carts. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The momentum of Korea's economic recovery is not proving strong enough to offset the downside risks. That's how the finance ministry assesses the situation in its monthly report. It says job creation and employment rates are expanding, but the pace of recovery is sluggish because of low inflation and a drop in consumer prices over the past 2 months. The Korean government also cited risks stemming from overseas, including the weak Japanese yen, deflation woes in the Eurozone, and the U.S. Fed's recent decision to end its quantitative easing. The report comes ahead of the Bank of Korea's monthly monetary meeting set for this Thursday. The central bank is widely expected to hold the key rate at 2% after cutting it by 25 basis points last month. The captain of the Seoul ferry that sank back in April has avoided the death penalty for now. Lee Jun-suk was instead sentenced to 36 years in prison. Others in his crew will also spend some time behind bars. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports on Tuesday's court verdict.
A district court in Gwangju on Tuesday sentenced Lee Jun-seok, the captain of the Seoul ferry, to 36 years in prison for abandoning ship at the time of the deadly sinking. He was, however, acquitted of murder charges, meaning he avoids the death penalty, which prosecutors had pushed for. The court said in their ruling that there wasn't enough evidence to convict Lee of murder. They said the prosecution had failed to prove that Lee was aware his actions would lead to the deaths of people on board. In the same ruling, the ferry's chief engineer, identified only by his family name, Pact, was convicted of murder and sentenced to 30 years in prison. He was found responsible for not helping 2 crew members who later died in the ferry escape. 13 other crew members were given sentences ranging between 5 and 20 years on charges of abandoning ship and violations of ship safety protocol. Prosecutors pinned most of the blame for the deaths of 300-plus people in the ferry disaster on Lee and his crew, as they told passengers to stay in the cabins while the crew hurriedly left the sinking ferry. Tuesday's verdicts bring the 5-month trial to a close. Prosecutors say they will appeal Tuesday's court decision on all 15 crew members. The ruling came hours after the Korean government ended its 7th-month underwater search inside the sunken Seoul ferry. The 6,800-ton ferry sank on April 16th off Korea's southwestern coast. The death toll in the tragedy currently stands at 295, with 9 still missing. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
An official full stop to the search operations for missing victims of the Seoul ferry disaster. The official announcement was made earlier today. Our Kang Chery reports on the government's decision made upon the request of the victims' families.
The underwater search operations for missing victims of the Seoul ferry disaster has come to an end, despite 9 people still being unaccounted for. Oceans and Fisheries Minister Lee Joo-young announced Tuesday morning that the government made the decision upon the request of victims' families.
We are announcing that the underwater search operations that continued for more than 200 days are being stopped. I sincerely regret calling off the operations without recovering all those unaccounted for.
Minister Lee said that parts of the hull are collapsing and that dropping water temperatures are making operations difficult and dangerous for divers. He added there was little possibility of recovering additional victims. Measures aimed at preventing bodies from drifting out of the sunken ferry will also come to an end. The emergency management headquarters in Chindo, the closest point of land to the accident site, will scale back operations and soon dissolve. Although underwater search operations have come to an end, victims' families are not giving up hope of finding their loved ones. They requested that the government fully review the options of raising the vessel, calling it a final means to finding the 9 who remain missing. Relatives also called on the government to keep them informed throughout the process. The minister said the Central Disaster Management Headquarters will decide on when to start raising the ferry from the seafloor after discussions with experts and relatives of the victims. That decision is likely to come after the Seoul ferry law takes effect. The law aims to uncover the causes of the disaster, which left more than 300 people dead. The last victim recovered from the vessel came late last month. Before that, no one had been found inside the sunken ferry since July. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
And in other news, the U.S. Special Envoy on North Korean human rights, Robert King, arrived in Seoul earlier today. He's expected to further pressure Pyongyang on its human rights violations, together with the UN Special Rapporteur on North Korea. Our Hwang Sung-hee has this report.
Washington's Special Envoy on North Korean human rights issues, Robert King, arrived in Seoul Tuesday amid growing international attention on Pyongyang's dire human rights situation. During his 3-day stay, King will meet with South Korean officials and attend a human rights forum. His trip coincides with a visit to Seoul by the UN Special Rapporteur on North Korea, Marzuki Darusman, and is largely focused on the ongoing UN moves to take the North Korean regime to the International Criminal Court on allegations of human rights violations. A draft resolution is expected to be adopted by the General Assembly's Third Committee as early as next week. It should then be officially approved by the UN General Assembly in December. And North Korea seems to have wrapped up its rare diplomatic charm offensive. In a statement given to UN member states last month, Pyongyang said that as of October 31st, it was suspending all talks on the draft resolution that urges the Security Council to consider sending North Korea to the ICC. The statement also warned those supporting the move will have to take full responsibility for the consequences that follow. Nonetheless, diplomats working with North Korean officials say the regime has become genuinely concerned about the recent UN moves, zooming in on its human rights situation. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
A growing number of North Koreans are apparently heading to China in search of work. The Beijing Bureau of the Korea International Trade Association says some 93,000 North Korean workers crossed into China last year. It says more North Koreans seem to be crossing the border to obtain foreign currency and that China welcomes them because they provide cheap labor. The figure has increased by an average of nearly 20% annually since 2010. That's in sharp contrast to the number of migrant workers from other countries, which grew just 9% during the same period. About 44,000 North Korean workers crossed into China in the first half of this year alone. Iconic Korean singer Lee Seung-cheol was denied entry into Japan this past weekend. A number of reports say the refusal could have something to do with a concert that he performed on Korea's easternmost Dokdo Island, which Tokyo also claims false claims to. Our Park Geun-hye reports.
The concert at the root of the controversy took place on Korea's Dokdo Island a day before Liberation Day in August. Lee Seung-cheol was there to sing his new song that day with a choir made up of teenage North Korean defectors. Fast forward a few months, and the 47-year-old set off for a trip to Japan on November 9th. However, upon his arrival at Tokyo's Haneda Airport, the singer was detained for 4 hours at the airport's immigration office. Various media outlets report that when Lee was asked why he was being held, an official said it was due to recent media exposure, presumably in reference to his Dokdo concert. Lee was said to be furious about his treatment, and when he threatened to expose what had happened, Japanese officials said his entrance had been denied based on his past use of marijuana more than 20 years ago. Despite the immigration office's claim, Lee has entered Japan more than 15 times since his arrest for marijuana use in Korea in the early 1990s. He even held a concert in Japan in the 2000s. Following the incident, Lee canceled his schedule in Japan and is now taking a break in Korea. Lee's agency says the singer believes the retaliatory denial of entrance was due to his concert on Dokdo, which Japan falsely claims to be its territory. This is not the first time that a Korean star involved in a Dokdo-related campaign has been discriminated against in Japan. Korean star Song Il-guk, who participated in a swimming project to Dokdo in 2012, was warned that he might experience problems if he tries to enter Japan, and the drama Song acted in was pulled off from the airwaves in Japan 6 days before it was due to premiere. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
And staying with this story, in response to this development, Korea's foreign ministry says Tuesday that a Korean consul in Japan inquired about the matter with Japanese authorities. The response was that they couldn't give a specific reason for why he was denied entry into Japan due to privacy policies. The Korean foreign ministry spokesperson says if what media outlets have reported turns out to be true, it is a very regrettable event. Nearly 50 students have been killed and more than 75 others injured in a school bomb attack in northeast Nigeria. To tell us more, Paul E. is joining us from the news center. Paul, this is the second suicide bomb attack by suspected Boko Haram militants in less than a week. It looks like the death toll continues to rise.
Well, it's shaping out to be one of the bloodiest school attacks to date. Police say a suicide bomber disguised as a student set off the deadly explosion which tore through a school in Nigeria's northeastern town of Paditsku. It marks the seventh attack this year on a school in the country. At least 48 people were killed, all believed to be between the ages of 11 and 20. In a statement, UN Chief Ban Ki-moon strongly condemned the violence and called for those responsible to be brought to justice.
The Secretary General is outraged by the frequency and brutality of attacks against educational institutions in the north of the country and reiterates his demand for an immediate cessation to these abominable crimes.
Although no group has claimed responsibility for the attack, Boko Haram militants are suspected. Their violent insurgency over the past 5 years has left thousands of civilians dead in Nigeria.
And turning now to the United States, police in New York City have announced that they will stop arresting people for possession of small amounts of marijuana. It looks like it to be quite a dramatic shift in drug policy for the city that has been in place since the early 1990s.
Well, the New York City Police Department says it's still strongly against the legalization of marijuana, but hopes this change in policy will reduce unnecessary arrests. The NYPD detained over 28,000 people last year alone for low-level marijuana crimes. Police Commissioner Bill Bratton announced Monday that officers will instead give tickets or a summons for those caught with a small amount of pot starting on November 19th. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio welcomed the move and said it would help young people and minorities.
Too many New Yorkers without any prior convictions have been arrested for low-level marijuana possession. Black and Latino communities have been disproportionately affected. There have been, in some cases, disastrous consequences for individuals and families. And our intention is to help all New Yorkers, particularly get our young people on the right track and avoid these unnecessary consequences.
New York City defines a small amount of marijuana to be 25 grams or less. City and law enforcement officials say the move is expected to free up police officers to make what they called more important arrests.
And coming back to Asia, Paul, China's online retail giant Alibaba has reported more than $2 billion in sales in just the first hour on this Singles Day today. So Black Friday is just around the corner in the U.S., but it looks like Chinese consumers are getting a head start, a strong start on their holiday shopping.
Well, it's on a completely different level. According to research firm ComScore, Singles Day in China has already surpassed the combined online sales records from Thanksgiving, Black Friday, and Cyber Monday in the U.S. Alibaba founder and CEO Jack Ma said Tuesday that nationwide purchases had already hit $4.9 billion by noon, with mobile transactions accounting for nearly half of the purchases. The record-breaking sales comes on the heels of the company's latest earnings call, which showed nearly a 54% increase in revenue on year.
The percentage of mobile transactions is a percentage of the overall ecosystem relative to a lot of the global peers that are out there, whether it be Amazon or eBay or even, if you look at regional like players like a Mercado Libre or a Rakuten, their mobile numbers are quite impressive. You don't really see the mobile penetration rates that Alibaba's putting up anywhere else in the global e-commerce landscape.
Singles Day, which is celebrated on November 11th, has now become the world's largest online shopping day, with sales expected to easily surpass last year's record of $5.8 billion.
Certainly a jackpot for Jack Ma. Now, in our next story, India's top court has ended a nationwide ban on women being able to work as makeup artists in the Bollywood industry. This boycott that lasted for 6 decades seems counterproductive, especially when the country is pushing to bring more women into workforce.
Well, this legal precedent is definitely a win for gender equality in the world's second largest nation in terms of population. Trade unions said the ban was to ensure men were not deprived of work. That justification was ruled as discrimination by India's Supreme Court on Monday. Chara Kurana, who was the first to bring up the case, said it was a victory to all working women in the industry.
I am very happy and satisfied because now all the women who want to be makeup artists will have job opportunities and can present their work with their name, which will bring them recognition.
India's $2 billion film industry is the largest in the world by ticket sales, and according to trade analysts, the Hindi language industry employs more than 250,000 people. Charity?
Slow changes there. Thank you so much for those stories, Paul, and we'll see you back here in just about 2 hours.
Hello everyone, I'm Kim Bo-kyung with the latest weather forecast. Now we begin with some unwelcome news that find us readings are higher than normal levels in parts of the central regions. Levels are at 117 micrograms per cubic meter over in Cheonan. Now, moving on to our satellite map, at the moment we are under cloudy skies and more clouds are set to move in, leading to showers in parts of Gyeonggi-do province later tonight. As for tomorrow, about 5 millimeters of precipitation are forecast in the morning. Although it won't be much, the rainfall may be accompanied by strong winds and stormy conditions in parts of the central regions. And it looks like the rainfall will pull down numbers on Thursday, which is college entrance exam day here in Korea. On to tomorrow's readings, Seoul peaks at 10, Busan reaches 17. As for other regions, Daejeon reaches 11, while Kumgang drops to 0. So those are the updates we're following at this hour. I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Bo-kyung, and that will do it for this edition of Arirang News. Thanks for watching and have a great evening.